So I'm joined for this presentation by several other people from the Build Up team, but also from Data Value people who have been our partners in developing Phoenix. Maybe we could just start with a really quick round of introductions. My name is Elena, and I'm the strategy lead at Build Up. And maybe Chris, would you like to introduce yourself next?
Yes, hi everyone. It's Christelle. I'm Elena's colleague and Caleb's and everyone here on the panel. And I work on digital research with Build Up. Cal?
Hello everyone. My name is Caleb Gichui, currently in Nairobi, and with the Build Up team. And pass it over to Ben.
My name is Benjamin Svigo. I'm co-founder of Data Value People, focusing on the software engineering and technical architecture side of things. I have a passion for the lean methodology and inclusion. I'll pass it over to Dan. Oh, we can't hear you, Dan.
No.
We'll try in a second.
Oh, we got you then.
You can hear me
I think
now?
maybe it's just yeah, we can hear you now.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Yeah. I'm Dan. I'm a data scientist, and I'm one of the founders of Data Value People. And I've been helping build Phoenix alongside the rest of Data Value People.
Okay, so thanks everybody. And so without further ado, we wanted to take some time to share with you Phoenix, which is this approach to social media programming by and for peace builders. Cool. There we go. And I just wanted to open with a bit of a reflection that talks about our motivation for developing Phoenix. I think our motivation came from a number of different places, and this quote is just something that I think has helped us reflect on the way that we approach social media data as big data. And it really has to do with the fact that a lot of the work that is out there looking at social media is done for commercial purposes. Is very extractive and doesn't center the voices of the narratives of the people that are being talked about, and can lead to this kind of new form of social and political control, is the way that this quote puts it. And so when we started engaging in social media analysis for peace building and for mediation, we realized that it was really important to have this centering the people that the data is talking about really at the heart of anything that we did, and that any tool or process that we built that was dealing with social media data and was thinking about social media programming really had to keep this in mind. So that's just as an opener about where we've come from. And so what Phoenix is, in a nutshell, is it's an open source, non-commercial and customizable process and tool to support peace builders and mediators who want to work ethically with social media data to inform programming. And it's a collaboration between Build Up and Data Value People. And I think you can, if you want more information about either organization, then you can ask us in the chat and we'll be happy to share that. When I say that Phoenix is a process, this in a nutshell is what the Phoenix process looks like. It starts with contextually grounded problem statements that address peace building objectives and that are connected to social media data. So a problem statement might be something like, how are gender and gender roles being discussed on social media in Libya, and how is that affecting tensions between people? Or how are young people expressing their ethnic identities in Yemen, and does that fall along conflict fault lines? So these are the kinds of problem statements that start off a Phoenix process. And then comes a data pipeline to add social media sources that are needed in order to answer the questions that are within that problem statement. On that data pipeline are applied customizable automatic labeling models to reduce the manual organizing of data. And then all of that data that is labeled goes onto a dashboard where it can be visualized in order to understand issues of engagement, of sentiment, and of the different networks that emerge. And based on the analysis that can be done with this visualization dashboard, we develop evidence-based initiatives that respond to social media insights. And often these initiatives are initiatives directly on social media. So we're now going to go through each one of these different parts of the Phoenix process in a little bit more detail. So the problem statements as I said, are really, really about spelling out what is it that you want to ask of social media. The reason this part of the process is so important to us is that our experience in researching on social media across a number of different conflict contexts is that people tend to, when they first approach, particularly peace builders, when they first approach social media research, they kind of just say, what can we learn about conflict on social media? And that question is actually too broad. It requires a bit more of an understanding of the kinds of things that can emerge from social media. So we've developed these two kind of frameworks, one which is around digital conflict drivers, and the other one which is around archetypes of polarization. We've written a little bit about these two, but we actually have two more serious publications coming out. One is a book chapter in a broader publication that will be discussing digital conflict drivers. And the other one on archetypes of polarization is also a book chapter in a different book. So we'll be able to share those resources. But the first part of the process is to provide some training on these different ways of understanding what we can see about social media. And then from that, collaboratively developing problem statements, really thinking about how can answering these research questions that form the problem statement lead to action, to peace building action afterwards. So that's kind of the first part of the Phoenix process. So once we have problem statements, the next thing that happens, oh wait, hang on. The next thing that happens is I got a bit lost there, Ben, because I think this is your slide, but yeah, the next thing that happens is basically the data pipeline. And Ben's going to talk a bit about the data pipeline. So go for it, Ben.
So I think to carry on from the other slide, the technical aims that we have when we're looking at problem statements is that as technicians, we want to make sure that when we're building stuff in Phoenix that it's there to try to help the peace builders to gain insight from the online data. There's three aspects of that Helen already mentioned: that we collect the data, we organize it, and we visualize it. And the reason I wanted to point out this is that Phoenix is really built in collaboration with the peace builders to make sure that every little part of it is doing some sort of value for the process of doing social media analysis. And it's not some technology that's going to solve all of the problems and trying to find all the insights out of what's possible on social media, like for instance some AI machine learning thing that's going to say whether something is hate speech or not. So yeah, the next slide please. So yeah, we take data from these data sources. So this includes Facebook posts, public pages and groups. We do Facebook comments. This requires some sort of manual assistance from the peace builders. And these are then from CrowdTangle API, which is a technical term. And then we also take tweets from handle or keyword search. And then the difference between that is whether we look at the list of users, so that the tweets that a user has made, or we're looking at some term that we want to get all the tweets that relate to that term. For instance, I don't know, maybe that could be a religion or something. We also look at videos and channels, but videos from a channel list or keywords. So that means that a channel will post a number of videos, and we can get all of the information about those videos for that channel, or again, all the videos related to some sort of keyword. And again, comments is the same thing, but then for a channel. So ACLID data is then, if you guys don't know what that is, that's some real-time data on location, dates, actors, fatalities, and types of political violence and protest events across across the world. So that's really for combining with the other sources for analysis. And then the next slide. Oh yeah, and then just to point out that other data sources can be added relatively easy. Next slide, please. And this is just a visualization of the data pipeline. So here we have the input, and then this organization, which is then the middle section, which includes manual labeling and classification. The important thing here in my mind is that the wait a second, I've just got lost on my notes. Yeah, that this tries to give you a concrete overview about what's going on, and also that we are trying to, the inference here is trying to group large amounts of data, and the organization is trying to take these data sources that have different kinds of structures and make them into a single structure so that we can process them and visualize them. And that the labeling process is how analysts, people that are the peace builders, can do a row level input on the data. And just to point out that manual data will actually be can actually be put in to the whole pipeline, so that it can be included in the visualizations, so that we don't need any clever AI systems to be able to use Phoenix. It's a set of tools that means that we can automate this process of processing data from social media. Yeah, then I'll pass on to Dan.
Great. Hopefully you can hear me now. Yeah. So yeah, just to take a step back at what the overarching kind of fundamental aim is here is we are trying to empower those peace builders to be able to answer their research question, and thus enable them to, the hope is, develop a more effective initiative to try to create some better outcome for that system. And so in a sense, we're trying to, at the abstract level, get an understanding, which is to say, build a model or representation or theory of that system that we have an interest in. And that, in this case, the interest is the dynamics and the drivers of conflict with the societies and how they're played out in discourse in digital public spaces. And when we have that model and representation, then we can ask it, okay, how do you think this is going to evolve into the future? And even further, you can say, how might the system be affected in the future if we were to take initiative X? That's the kind of general fundamental game we're playing in all cases when it comes to data-driven decision making, which is what we're trying to do to empower those peace builders to do that process. And so to do that, we need to be able to view what's going on in that system at a higher level than purely the micro level. So purely at the level of just reading posts and actually reading the discourse specifically. So it might be useful to draw an analogy with something a bit more concrete than digital spaces. So if you want to understand a forest, you don't go and consider every tree as an individual, you categorize them into species. So you might say, and once you have that categorization, you might then look at aggregated or more macro level metrics and properties of that system. So for the forest, we can ask what proportion of the forest is oak trees. And in the same way, we want to be able to ask what proportion of the discourse is about the economy or is about gender. Now, to be able to answer that question, what proportion of discourse is about gender, we need an efficient way to identify what discourse data points are actually about gender. One way of doing that, it would be to manually go through all of the data points and manually label them. That isn't efficient. That isn't possible given our time constraints on us. So this is where the automatic classification tools and models come in. So what the process is we will ask the peace builders themselves to develop a taxonomy, a set of classes, a set of topics that they're interested in that is specific to their research question. And once they've developed that and we've discussed it with them and help them develop it, then we ask them to go through and manually label a small subsample of the scraped data that we've already scraped from the social platforms. And then we can use those manual labels to build a general classification model, an automated classification model using the standard tools of data science and machine learning. And once we have this, then we can run this on the rest of the data and get a classified data set for the entire corpus of the data that we scrape from the social platforms. And with that, then we can answer the question, what proportion of discourse is about gender, for instance. Again, that's just an example question. And again, we might, with that classification, we might then want to go a level deeper. Going back to the tree analogy, we might want to ask not just how many trees are oak trees, but how are the oak trees distributed within this forest? Are they evenly spread out in the forest, or are they in very tight clusters? And that might give us inform us about how that system works and thus how we might affect that system. And the analogy is then we can ask, okay, in what areas of the network of actors, the network of individuals, is gender being discussed? Is it being discussed pretty generally throughout the network, or is it very localized to certain groups or certain clusters of accounts and pages? And again, that gives the peace builders a really direct insight into how that system is working so that they can develop their initiatives to create better outcomes with that understanding. So that's really what this whole automatic classification inference part is about. And yeah, so just the details on it. So that first bullet point, that's kind of what I've been discussing. The second point is how we do it. So we have some initially very quite simple, crude, but effective, 80% effective kind of standard kind of stuff, 20% effort, 8% effective kind of stuff with rule-based models. And then we can develop more statistical, more advanced data-driven, well, machine learning-esque models. And we do that for stuff like text relevance. So whether the actual post is relevant to the research question, what the topic is, stuff like whether it might be deemed hate speech or the type of conflict going on or the type of behavior that that person's expressing. And then we also do, recently we've been doing actor and affiliation labeling. So we've been looking at labeling particular Facebook pages as categorizing those into terms of, what kind of actor they are, what kind of topics they are about, what kind of subjects they focus on. And lastly, of course, we a lot of the classification and models that we use are open source models that are out there in the public domain, which is standards. So yeah, that's the classification part. Thanks.
Thanks, Dan and Ben. And I'm actually going to cheat and go back one slide. Oops, no, I'm not. There we go. Now I've gone back one slide. And I'm going to just take a moment to re-go through this pipeline. So now that you've seen, so what Dan just described is that step here that is, the organized and anonymized manual labeling and inference. He just went into that in detail. And previously, Dan gave you the whole idea of how the data pipeline works. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to try and explain to you how this works in practice when a peace building organization is using Phoenix. And I'm going to use a concrete example from a set of organizations we're working with in Jordan who wanted to explore how polarization around religion and tradition was playing out on social media. That's their problem statement. And to be more concrete, what they're looking to find out is what can we observe on social media that suggests traditional and religious norms may be affecting levels of a self-expression on Jordanian social media. Things like what terms and expressions are used on social media to indirectly address taboos, how are they used and who uses them? Things like, do media outlets contribute to polarization around religion and tradition? And if so, how? What terms and expressions do media outlets use to support, reaffirm, or affirm polarizing views around religion and tradition? How do they engage with opposing views? Okay, these are some of the research questions in the problem statement. So that's the first thing that they came up with. Then they had to decide, where are we going to look, right? So the left-hand side of the diagram, where are we going to look? And they said, we want to look on Facebook and we want to look on Twitter. And very specifically, we are interested in this list of Facebook pages. So they came up with a list of about 100 Facebook pages. And I think, I can't remember how many Twitter handles, but I think it's about the same number of Twitter handles that we're now collecting data on, right? So we're collecting all the Facebook posts and all of the tweets made by this list of Facebook pages and this list of Twitter handles. That's the first narrowing that they've done. And that's the scraping is the raw data, right? That is the second box here. And then they had to think, okay, in order to make sense, like Dan was saying, in order to make sense of all of this text that is coming in the Facebook posts and the tweets, what do we need to do? How do we need to classify it? How do we need to organize it, right? And so they've built 3 ways to classify it. The first one is a relevance classifier, which is what Dan was just saying, is this even relevant to our research question? And the relevance classifier is this about religion or tradition? If it's not, we're not interested in terms of this. So let's filter that out. Okay, so now we've got a bunch of posts and tweets that are about religion and tradition. And then those are further classified by topic. And the topics are developed by the peace building organizations. So they basically have done this manual labeling process. They've looked at a bunch of posts and a bunch of tweets, and they've said, this post is about this topic that I'm interested in. So they've got subtopics within the issue of religion and tradition that are of interest, or crossover topics, like it's religion and it's also health. That's interesting, what's being discussed here. And they're also labeling by actors, which is the last thing that Dan was talking about. So they've said, these Facebook pages, we're going to label them by what kind of actor they are. So they're labeled by whether it's a religious leader, or it's a social media influencer, or it's a government organization, right? and the same for the Twitter handles. So they've done all of that, and then all of that gets put into a dashboard, which we haven't shown you yet, but it's the next thing that Khaled is going to show you. So hopefully that gives a sense of an example. Chris, I wanted to invite you, if it's not too much putting you on the spot, to give another example of what I just said, but for a different country. Can you give that a shot, just so we get one more example?
I love being on the spot. Another example, yes, we can also, I saw that Ziad's with us on the call, so we can talk about Yemen as well, specifically. So in Yemen, their problem statement, let me just read it out as is. So in Yemen, they're focusing mostly on how expressions of religious and ethnic identities on social media can increase or decrease polarization or hate or recruitment and so on. So what they did, similarly to what Elena was explaining now for Jordan, so they start with from their knowledge of the context, and in addition to a lot of background papers that can help them know more about what's happening online, they identify an issue, they develop their problem statement, and then based on that and their knowledge from the context, they develop their list of data sources. In Yemen specifically, they're looking at Twitter and Facebook as well, but we have other teams and in other countries that are looking as well on YouTube, and we know that we can also look at Instagram. So and Caleb will talk more about this in a second. So they compiled their list, and then they said for Yemen specifically, it was interesting because in addition to choosing their Facebook pages and their Yemen and the Twitter handles, they also developed a list of keywords that can help us also search, which can act as a data source as well. So we don't only depend on a page that posts, we can also use keywords that can help us scrape all of Twitter to see who's using those words. Obviously, there are some do's and don'ts for how to choose your keywords to make sure the noise is little, but we got here now. And now they had all the data. So when they had the raw data, they had thousands of posts and tweets that they could read. And with their subjective knowledge of the context, they can say, in respect to my problem statement, what are the topics or what are the categories or classes of conversations that I need to answer in my analysis. And then they developed their labels. So that's what we call them technically, but they're basically the topics. They developed their list of topics, and then they went on and they labeled, or they chose what are the words and what are like all of the technicalities that Ben, Dan, and Elena were sharing. And we're able to develop kind of a word I like to use, but no one else on the team likes to use, but kind of a glossary of what are the topics and the features that come with them. And then yeah, we soon we're gonna put them on the dashboard as well for their analysis. Is there anything?
So again, here in Yemen, right, when it came to the labeling process, we had a relevance classifier, and the relevance is this about ethnicity or religious identity, right? This is about identity, basically. That's the relevance classifier. If it is about identity, then keep the data. If not, filter it out. Once we know it's about identity, as Chris was saying, what are the topics within that? What gets discussed with identity, right? And also, they're also labeling actors. So what kind of actors are discussing in what way? And that's very, very important here, because we're trying to see how youth discuss versus how others discuss. So that's quite an important classifier here. Okay, hopefully that helped to land this rather technical, but I think also very grounded process. And so once we've labeled all that data's all been scraped, it goes onto a dashboard. Khaled.
Yes, all right, just give me 1 second. Let me, I need sharing.
So Caleb is actually going to talk you through the dashboard. So Julie, can you give Caleb permission to share his screen? And he's going to talk you through these 4 sections of the dashboard that data goes into, which is one section which is about engagement, another one about sentiment, another one about networks, and then all the raw data that can be searched. But we actually want to show you a sample dashboard from a different one, a different piece of work that is not what Chris and I talked about, but a different one. Okay, I'll stop sharing my screen. Caleb?
Yes.
Did that work?
So, yeah. So give me 1 second.
If you want, Elena, we have a question in the meantime. I don't know if we were going to answer.
Oh, we did? Oh, I didn't see it. What languages are supported? So, Emilia, we were going to cover that later, but while Caleb does his thing, right now, we are focused very much on Arabic. We have just also started working with Kurdish. Of course, English is supported. And in essence, most languages are supported with some limitations that we can discuss. So we have mostly worked on Arabic and English, now also Kurdish. we have an interest as a team in underrepresented languages, but we can make it work for many other languages. And if you have a specific language that you're interested in, then put it in there and we'll let you know what the answer is. Cal, back to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Elena, and the rest. So the dashboard, so what you have in front of you right now is the dashboard. And this is a culmination of, the pipeline, and the tagging. And this is what now the users, the analysts get to see. And so we've divided the dashboard into 4 sections, but I'll start with the first one. At the very top, you'll find what you call controls, but basically, layman terms, you can call them filters. So these allow you to filter by date, by month, by attention, whether content has tension or not, by relevance or not relevance. So for example, like what Helena mentioned about content that is relevant or not relevant. So for example, here, if I wanted to filter out the dashboard to only give me content that was relevant for the entire month, let's say, for example, a specific month on this month, for example. So it's going to just give it a second as it's loading. But what I'm going to do then, I'm going to click on the relevant filter and then select one. It just tells me that I'm getting now all the data that is relevant for that specific month. Okay, now I can start going into the tensions or into other topics that I want to look at. If I'm curious about a specific topic that a community has been working on, then I'm bound to find that topic here because now I'm looking at the relevant data. So all these are examples of things that you're able to tag the data by. So for example, we're able to tag by political tensions and the rest, economic labor tensions. So this just shows you a list of different types of filters that you can apply to the data once you start tagging the data by when you're trying to answer the questions that Helena had put out at the beginning.
Can I interject, Caleb?
Yeah.
So just to say, the filters are based on the labels that you decide to build. So in the example that Chris and I were saying, right, we have the relevance filter always has to be there, right? Is this data relevant, yes or no? But then the other filters depend on what you decide you want to label by. So in this case, it was tensions and topics, which Caleb will show you in a second. But in the Yemen example that we were giving, it's topics and actors, right? So it's a different set of filters. So the filters that are here are dependent on how you decide to, what automatic labeling models you decide to build, which, as Dan was explaining, depends on what you're trying to emerge from the text. Sorry, Caleb.
All right. So so once you've sorted, you've created your filter, and this again, it's not supposed to be one-off. You can play around with the filters just to explore the data further. So I'm just going to leave it there and then minimize. And then always remember that the sources, the pages and the accounts, this identified together with the local partners. So these are pages that they're already interested in based on the work that they've been doing. They know either has this type of content. So the first thing, we try and lay out is, the top 5 pages by number of posts, like which of the pages that they selected are posting the most, are getting most comments, just so that they know that, for example, if they were interested in this page, they can know whether it's changing over time and how it's performing over time. So this is just the overall metrics. And then you start to go deeper now into the topic. So remember that we had mentioned that this data is already tagged by topic. So because I selected relevant, so I'm getting all the posts that have been tagged by a topic. Sorry for the background noise. So what means, for example, is if I highlight here, I can find on that month specifically this post. The topic of foreign countries got the highest post on Facebook. This specific topic was being discussed quite a lot on Facebook for the pages that have been identified. And then Syria got the highest number of comments. The topic of Syria got generated the highest number of comments. And then for the tweets, the same. It all continues. And then, for example, most of the retweets during that month were on the Lebanese political party. So I won't dive into the details. So just give you an overview so that you have an idea. And then here so that first part, like I mentioned, is just kind of gives you the metrics. And then here now I can now dive into the specific topics that you see here in these graphs. So when I select, I can select, for example, I'm interested to look at topics about burglaries, for example. So I can deselect that and then only select burglaries. And what that does is, just give it a second. So what it does, it tells me the five most shared Facebook posts that were on that topic were this ones here. And you know, and goes on. And these were the 5 most shared Facebook posts that had the most interactions on that same topic, and on and on. And you can, you know, you can select multiple topics if you are interested, maybe burglaries and arrests. Maybe I want to see, you know, what there, you know, any similarities or things like that. So here you'll find, for example, arrests had more shares. So that definitely they'll be, because this is a ranking system, so you'll get the most. But for example, here you'll find Facebook posts with the most interactions. You kind of have both, where you have the burglaries and the arrests, and it all depends on, you know, the ranking of the data. So you can go on and look at the top 5 Facebook posts with the most comments on those same topics, and on, you know, and look at also the 5 most shared, the top 5 Facebook comments by number of reactions. And this is what we also mentioned, that the comments are generated through the partners. So they're the ones, it requires a bit of a manual task to, you know, to scrape the comments. And then you have the top 5 tweets with the most retweets on the topics that we just selected. So just clearing the topics, just so that you get the, you know, we look at the entire data set. Just give it a second. So if I now scroll further down, I find, just loading, yeah, so this is now a timeline of Facebook posts over a specific month, and I can look at the peaks and the dips. So that starts to tell me, for example, there's something that was going on August 4th that has maybe the highest peak. Same for Twitter, also does the same thing, where I can look at a month by month and look at the differences. And then at the bottom here, now we combine ACLED data and social media data, and this is to try to answer these questions of, is there a relationship between what happens offline and what happens online? As you can see, you know, I won't get into the analysis, but it starts to give you an idea of what are people talking about, and what are some of the events. So if you want to filter the different types of events that are happening throughout the month, you also have a filter here for the different types of events, and you can say, I only want to look at you know, clashes, for example. So I can deselect and then only look at the clashes. So that will give it a second, and then it will only show me the events during that month that were clashes, and then the social media data in regards to that. I mean, also whether related to that, but the social media data, we try also to check, are there any patterns that we're getting from that. That also applies for Twitter as well, where we also map it against ACLED events. And then we map also the ACLED events, and this is just to give you an idea of where the events are happening. And if you also, again, play around with the filter, you get to see the different events across Lebanon. So, so that's just the overview where we talk about the topic and engagement analysis. So who is engaging with what content, and which topics are, you know, trending on Facebook and Twitter. And then we jump into sentiment analysis. So just give it a second. Yeah. So let me scroll all the way back up. So the filters also apply, the very first filters we talked about also apply under sentiment analysis. And here we look at neutral, negative, positive, or mixed sentiment on posts. And also we map it together with the topics. So, so for example, overall, if we look at all the posts, you know, we find that most of them have a neutral sentiment. But then where it starts to get interesting is where you start mapping them against the topics. So for instance, you know, education seems to, you know, bring out this positive sentiment. You know, that's the topic of education. And then, you know, here opposition to current government gives out, you know, predominantly higher or 50% negative sentiment. So this starts to also give you an idea of when people are talking about this topic, it tends to be more negative or more positive or more neutral. So also it also helps the analysts when they're looking at the data, you know, to start to make those decisions that are going to help the content. And then, yep.
I'm going to have to ask you to speed up a little bit because we need to time to address some of the questions that
Yes.
are coming in. So maybe
Yes.
the rest is about Twitter on this one. So if you could just quickly
Yeah.
show the network graphs and the raw data, just to give people a sense of just one network graph and what the raw data one is.
All right, great. So the network graphs, so I can look at the retweet network. So let me just open that. So when you open the graph, it opens into a new tab just because you know, the platform is the networks are quite huge. So this shows you this was the retweet, yeah, I think, yeah, retweet graph. So it shows you who's retweeting the other on social media, and also the clusters give you an idea of which groups and topics that people are clustered in. If you have a particular account that you're interested in, you can actually just come in here and search for it and find out which who they're connected to and which cluster they belong to on Twitter. Then going back to the network graph, so we have a couple. So we also have Facebook post topic network. So let me also open that very quickly. And this opens up all the different topics that are being discussed. And it shows you how they're connected across the conversations that are happening on social media. And again, you can just search, depending on how large your topics list is, you can just search for a specific topic and just get to see which topic it appears most closely to over time. And then the raw data allows you to play around with the data yourself if you want to explore a bit further. So the key thing here is this keyword search allows you to search the entire database. So for example, if I want to, I put in 2020, and if I want to search that from the data, so once I click on that, it will show me all the posts, Facebook posts that have the keyword 2020, or all the comments that also have the keyword 2020 and the tweets. So imagine this, if you're looking for keywords that are hateful or polarizing in a society, you might definitely find this. And then also you're able to see which actors are posting the most, and also the type of sentiment that that keyword is mainly tagged to. So I'll stop there. And then, yeah, if there are any questions regarding the dashboard, we can always come back to the tab.
There are tons of questions coming in, which is why I cut you short. Sorry, Caleb.
No worries.
And I'm going to go back to the slides just to kind of close out on a couple of comments that I think will answer some of the questions, but not all of them. I've also been trying to type some of the answers as we go. So I just wanted to kind of, finish out the description of the process, and then talk a little bit about what we do and what we don't do, and also how is this different from other tools, which is one of the questions that was in there. So the end of the Phoenix process is, okay, you've got all of this data, but this data is meant to answer a set of research questions. So hopefully, if it's been labeled in a way that enables the answering of those questions, then the kind of analysis that Caleb was very quickly describing is actually answering some of the research questions in your problem statement. And then what that does is it allows for the design of an initiative on social media. We've got a bunch of content around, how to essentially design initiatives on social media that respond to polarization. And what we've done is basically marry that with join that with the answer to these research questions. I'm not going to go into more detail on this because we can come back to it if anybody is interested. So just a really quick kind of overview of what we've done so far. So we've deployed this in 8 countries with different partners, and scraped somewhere in the region of 1 million bits of social media data since we started. And we've only been doing it for a few months. As I said, it's optimized for Arabic, although it's also processing Kurdish and obviously English. And we have an interest in other languages. There's some that would be very easy to add, others that would be a little more complicated. We've collaborated with academic institutions and researchers to build some of the models. So we're always looking for people who are interested in helping build the different models. And we've done that particularly, for example, for Kurdish, which we're working with now. And Phoenix has served, both a UN agency and local peace building organizations. So we think it has fairly broad applicability. I also just want to be really clear about some of the limitations on what we can do. One is that building the perfect classifier that is going to get all the labeling right and emerge all of the topics that you want is probably not possible within the resources that we all have as peace building organizations. But I think the automation that we're offering, and we think the automation that we're offering is really important in helping us to deal with large quantities of data. The other thing is that we're not looking at all that happens on all of social media. we're focusing in on a small but important subset of conversations on social media. Your choice of data sources will narrow where we're looking. We're not looking at all the Facebook pages. We're looking at this set of Facebook pages or this set of tweets using these keywords. So we're narrowing down, and then we're further narrowing down by labeling, by creating a filter that labels by relevance. So these are the posts that we're interested in looking at, and these are the ones that we're not. Somebody asked in the chat, what is the methodology for relevance? We're not going to go into a lot of detail on this, but in essence, it goes like this. If the research question is about religion and tradition, then we will give you, as the organization that is building that relevance filter, because it's a collaboration with the peace building organization, thousands of rows of data, and we'll ask you to label any post that is relevant to that broad topic of religion and tradition that you're looking at. And once you've labeled it, to identify what are the features within that post that determine that that is about religion and tradition. So literally, what are the words and phrases that are used? And then we'll use that to basically label more data, and we'll go through an iterative process until we really identify a set of features that are able to identify that this post or this tweet is relevant to your conversation. So that's how it works in summary. And then the last bullet point is this tool won't do things for you. You will do things with it. We really see it as a process. So when people say, can this tool, help me understand polarization on Twitter in the USA? No, the answer is no. It's more, can it help you answer a set of research questions that you will answer by looking at the data? And I think the reason we say that is we get a little wary of kind of over promising what a tool like this can do. And so in summary, why would you go with Phoenix instead of with Crimson Hexagon, or I can't remember, there's a Q&A that is listing a bunch of other commercial social media tools. These are the three reasons that we think it's different and it's useful to peace building organizations. The first one is that the technology is open source and non-commercial. So you can set it up if you want. All the code is on GitHub. But if you want us to set it up, then as us being Build Up and Data Valley people, we'll charge you for what it costs. We don't want to make a profit off of it. So that's already a big difference. The second reason is that the methods are customizable. So this whole thing that we talked about, the problem statements, the data pipelines, the labeling models, and the dashboards are meant to fit your peace building needs, and we will work with you to customize them if we're the ones that are doing the setup. Obviously, if you're doing the setup, then go be our guest and customize it to your own needs. And then finally, we've really made this, it's been made by a group of peace builders and at Build Up in collaboration with Data Valley people, and it's been made for peace builders. So we really think that the tech is optimized for the analysis needs to inform peace building programming. And we can obviously incorporate training on what we know about peace building programming on social media. And we really want to learn with all of you and to make sure that this is a collaborative effort. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Did I just do that? I think I did. My computer's frozen. So maybe someone else can start answering the questions because I can't get out of the presentation right now.
Yes, I can distribute the questions.
Go on, Chris.
So this one's for you, actually, and obviously Dan and Ben and Kat, if you want, but how sustainable is it as a program, Phoenix? Is it a program?
I don't know, it's an approach, I think, is what I would say. So I wouldn't say that we're trying to sustain it as a program. I think it's more, we've done this to deliver a set of programs. We are delivering a program with it, and we think other people might find it useful too. But it will need funding to continue. So in the sense that if you want to use it, we'd have to look for funding to customize it for you, etc. Unless you just want to take the code and set it up yourselves. So I think that's the quick answer to that.
Okay. And Cal, you were talking about offline, online when you mentioned the events. Are there any ways we look at online, offline, the correlation between them? And how do we get to that? How do we get the data of offline?
So the offline data is mainly from ACLED, but if organizations are collecting their own offline data, like we've known different partners that are already collecting this either from report monitoring, for early warning monitoring and things like that. So that data can then be pulled into the system and then be used just to make sure that it also follows the parameters, like it has a columns, it has the dates and things like that. then it can also be pulled into the pipeline to be analyzed together with social media data, just to see if there are any patterns or any correlations. Yeah.
And can I also, Carl, sorry, Ben, you wanted to say something? No. I just wanted to add to this as well, Caleb. Today we all acknowledge, and obviously the team build up and the data value people, we all acknowledge that the online affects the offline and the other way around. And this is why we also we have created the ways for, like you mentioned, Carl, one of our partners or two of our partners who are also looking at offline data. We want to support more linking the online to offline. We cannot create the data ourselves, so it has to come. And this is also one of the things you were mentioning, Elena, before. What's the difference with other platforms? Well, the difference is you tell the platform which data you're looking at, and not the other way around. And one of them is also offline data.
I'm trying to answer some of the questions that are in the chat. So I hope, I think Theo, I think I answered you. Ethan, I think I answered you. If I haven't, just post in the chat saying, no, you didn't actually answer. And Christine, I think I answered you as well. Moa, I think I answered you about sentiment analysis as well. Ben posted the open repo, so that's good. Jay, can you speak more about the role of action research in the concept and method? I mean, we could do a whole webinar on that, Jay. I think that the core is this idea of how we go from problems to, it's the bookends of that process that we described. So the problem statement, the research questions that we develop around the problem statement are meant to be questions that then have an actionable output. And then when we get to the program design part, so at the end of the analysis, what we're doing is we're saying, okay, of the research findings that answered these research questions, how are they actionable, and what program do we want to design? So that's why we feel it's action research essentially, and that's been central to the concept and the method. I could say a lot more, but hopefully that gives you an indication of how we're thinking about it. I think there were a few more questions, right, Chris?
Yes, there's still two. There's one, is there any guideline of the tool that we can know more about? Like, is there a toolkit or guidelines?
Yeah. Should we make it public? We do have a user manual that we probably need to make a public version of. Like, we've created user manuals as we've gone, right, Chris? So I think the answer is no. Right now, we don't have a public resource. This webinar is the beginning of our attempt to make what we're doing public, and we probably should make a public resource. So thanks for the prompt on that.
There's one question that I personally didn't understand, but maybe it's my English, and I don't know, Christine, if you want to add, or maybe you answered actually. Is there any further research on influences of expat communities on this type of social media analysis?
Oh, I don't know anything about that. It's a really interesting question. The answer is I don't know. Does anyone else know?
Influences of expat communities. What do you mean with expat? Like specific, like geographical expats, people who left? I don't know, Christine, if you can add.
Well, she can't speak, right? So maybe we'll say, Christine, we're really intrigued by that question. Can you send us an email about it? Yeah, seriously, give us a call. Also, just because I know we don't have tons of time. Someone's raised their hand, but I think, Julia, unless I'm mistaken, they can't actually speak. So we need to, so they need to type the question if there's a question remaining. I think that's right. So if anybody has any more questions. Oh, Christine. Oh, they can speak, Julie. Christine, do you want to say what you meant? Sorry. Whoops. Christine, do you want to say what you meant? You can take the mic and go for it. Oh, Christine? Okay, maybe it wasn't meant to be. I shut it down too soon. Sorry, but I hope we'll have another chance to exchange about that. Thank you so much for making it. It's really exciting for us to be sharing this publicly after a lot of things under wraps. I think if you want to get in touch with any of us, I'm going to put the team email address here. This is the build up team email address, and of course, if there's anything that is specific to data value people, will pass it on to to Ben and Dan and the team as well. Yeah, thank you for joining us, and we hope to stay in touch. Thanks, everybody.
Christine, it's okay, Christine.